At the groundbreaking ceremony for the Hargrove Creek Industrial Park, I reached out to shake hands with the man my daughter had married 8 months earlier. He looked down at my calloused fingers, the way you look at something you've stepped in, smiled for the cameras, and said loud enough for 3 county commissioners and a local news crew to hear. I don't shake hands with tradespeople. No offense, but I know where those hands have been. The laughter was polite, the kind you do when you're not sure if something was a joke. I pulled my hand back slowly. I looked him in the eye, and I said, quietly enough that only he could hear it, "That's all right, son. You just shook hands with the man who owns the ground you're standing on." His smile didn't disappear right away. It took about 4 seconds. 4 very long seconds. Before we get to that morning, I need to tell you something about hands. My name is Frank Dolan. I'm 63 years old. For 31 years, I owned and operated Dolan Site Works, a land grading and civil prep company based out of Macon County, Georgia. We weren't glamorous. We didn't have a logo on a glass tower. We had 3 aging cat graders, a crew of 18 men I'd known since before some of them could drive, and a reputation built on one principle my father drilled into me when I was 14 years old, standing in the red clay mud of a cleared lot in the middle of July. "Frank," he said, not looking up from the survey stake he was driving, "a man's hands tell you who he is before his mouth gets a chance to lie." My father graded land in Macon County for 40 years. His hands were wide and brown, permanently creased with Georgia dirt, and he shook every hand he ever encountered with the same firmness. The county executive, the lumber delivery driver, the retired school teacher who called to complain about the dust from our equipment. He didn't adjust his grip based on the size of the title on the business card. I grew up watching him do it, and I grew up doing it the same way. By the time I was 58, Dolan Site Works had done the prep work on 11 of the 16 largest commercial developments in a 4-county radius. We weren't the biggest company in the room. We were the one people called when they needed the job done right and done quiet, without drama, without change orders that tripled the budget, and without a superintendent who disappeared when the ground turned bad. When my daughter told me she was engaged to a man named Prescott Langley III, I did what any father does. I looked him up. Prescott was 34. He had grown up in Buckhead, Atlanta, the kind of neighborhood where the driveways are longer than most people's yards. His family had money the old way, which is to say they'd had it wrong enough that they'd forgotten what it originally felt like to earn it. He had an MBA from Vanderbilt, a partnership position at the commercial real estate development firm called Meridian Horizon Group, and a handshake that, as I would come to learn, he regarded as something you gave to equals. He was sharp. I'll say that. He could read a deal structure the way some people read a menu, quickly, confidently, and with immediate opinions. In the first 6 months of knowing him, I noticed he had 3 settings in any conversation. If you were useful, he was charming. If you were powerful, he was deferential in the specific, calculating way of someone who viewed deference as a short-term investment. And if you were neither, he was pleasant, in the way a toll booth is pleasant. Functional. Efficient. Not unkind, exactly. Just absent. I fell into the 3rd category immediately. It wasn't overtly rude what he did. It never is with men like Prescott. He never forgot my name or skipped my hand at a gathering. He called me sir, always, but there was something in the way he said sir that had the same energy as a man holding a door open for a dog, technically polite, completely dismissive. My daughter is 31. She is the most competent person I've ever met in my life, and I say that as a man who has hired a lot of competent people. She has her mother's instinct for reading a room and her grandfather's patience for letting a situation develop before she acts. She runs the administrative side of Dolan Site Works since she was 24, and before that she got a civil engineering degree from Georgia Tech in 3.5 years while working summers driving survey stakes. She knew exactly who her father was, and I knew from the careful way she watched Prescott at family dinners, from the slight stillness that came over her face when he told one of his subtle jokes about farmers and country people, that she was filing things away. Watching, waiting for the development to complete before she passed judgment. I did the same. The Hargrove Creek project came to us through the County Development Authority in February. It was a significant commercial park, 62 acres of graded and prepped land for a mixed-use, light industrial development with a projected build-out of around $40 million. Macon County hadn't seen a project of that size in a decade. Every grading and site prep contractor in a 3-state radius knew the bid was out. What most of them didn't know was that 14 years earlier, during a period when the county was restructuring its land holdings, I had quietly purchased 11 of those 62 acres through a land trust. The parcels were in the eastern section of the site, a strip of land that sat between the proposed access road and the creek buffer. Without those parcels, the access configuration for the entire industrial park was legally unworkable. I hadn't bought them for leverage. I'd bought them because I knew the ground there was complicated, play-heavy, and prone to settling, and I thought they'd eventually be needed for drainage infrastructure. Turned out I was right about both the drainage and the leverage. I didn't publicize this ownership. The land trust had a separate name. It appeared in county records, the way a lot of these things do, as a line in a database that nobody reads unless they're doing very thorough due diligence. Meridian Horizon Group was the development lead on the Hargrove Creek project. Prescott was the project director. He had not done thorough due diligence. I knew this by March. My attorney had confirmed it. The access road design in their preliminary site plan ran directly through my eastern parcels. They priced the entire project without accounting for a land acquisition they didn't know they needed. To proceed as designed, they would need to purchase my 11 acres or redesign the access road, an option their traffic engineers had already ruled out due to creek buffer setbacks. I said nothing. I attended the county groundbreaking ceremony in April as a member of the local business community. A number of my crew's families had been invited. The local news was there. The 3 county commissioners had shown up in matching blue ties. Prescott was running the ceremony. He had a podium and a microphone, and the easy confidence of a man who had given 100 of these speeches, the ones where you talk about jobs and investment and community without saying anything specific enough to be held accountable for. He was good at it. I'll give him that. I was standing at the edge of the crowd with a cup of bad coffee when he saw me. He made his way over with the specific body language of a man fulfilling a family obligation. We were in public. There were cameras. He was going to shake his father-in-law's hand. He reached out. I reached back. And that was when he made the choice that defined everything that came after. Maybe it was the work jacket I was wearing. The old Carhartt with the Dolan Sightworks patch on the chest that I'd had for 12 years and hadn't thought to change because it was 7 in the morning and cold. Maybe it was the county commissioners watching and something in him needing to establish the hierarchy before the cameras captured us on equal footing. Maybe it was just who he was. He looked at my hand, then at the commissioners, then at the news camera, and he pulled his hand back and said what he said. I don't shake hands with tradespeople. No offense, but I know where those hands have been. I told him what I told him. He heard the words. He understood the words. And then his brain spent 4 full seconds trying to place them into a context that made sense with everything he thought he knew about me. The ceremony concluded. The shovels went in the ground for the photos. Prescott gave his remarks. I drank my coffee. My daughter, who had been standing 15 feet away and had heard every word of our exchange, looked at me once, a long, quiet look, and then looked away. She didn't speak to Prescott for the rest of the morning. That was a Saturday. By Monday morning, his firm's real estate attorney had found the land trust records. Prescott called me at 7:45. I was in the truck on my way to a job site in the next county over. I let it go to voicemail. He called back at 8:15. I let that one go too. At 9 o'clock, he texted, 4 words, "We need to talk." I replied, "I'm available Thursday at 2. I want to be clear about something because I've told this story before and people sometimes misread my patience as strategy." Yes, knowing the situation gave me leverage, but the decision to wait, to stay quiet and watch and let the facts develop rather than confronting Prescott the moment I saw what kind of man he was, that came from something older than strategy. When I was 26, I partnered with a man on a small grading contract, a man who I knew was cutting corners on a retention basin behind a subdivision in Bibb County. I didn't say anything because the money was good, and I told myself it probably wouldn't matter. 3 years later, that basin failed in a heavy rain event and flooded 6 homes. Nobody was hurt, but 2 families lost everything they couldn't replace. Photographs. My partner went out of business. I survived, technically, but I carried that basin for a long time. I promised myself I'd never again stay quiet about a man's character because the timing was inconvenient. I'd watch, I'd document, and when the moment came, I'd say exactly what needed to be said on the record, where it couldn't be ignored. Thursday at 2, Prescott arrived at my office. Not the job trailer on the Macon County project, my actual office, the one above the equipment yard on Dolan Road, with the framed site plan of our first major commercial development on the wall and the old Caterpillar scale model my father kept on his desk for 30 years sitting on mine. He came alone. I expected that. Men who are trying to negotiate down from a bad position don't usually bring witnesses. He sat in the chair across from my desk. He looked at the room the way people look at things that don't confirm their assumptions, taking it in without commenting. I had a cup of coffee on my desk. I hadn't offered him one. "I'll be direct," he said. "We have a site plan issue." "All right," I said. "The access road configuration as designed goes through parcels that are apparently held by a trust connected to your name. Our attorneys identified it Monday morning." He paused. "I'd like to understand the nature of that ownership and discuss a resolution." "The nature of the ownership is that I bought the land 14 years ago," I said. "It's in the county records. Your due diligence team should have caught it in the preliminary title search." I watched him process that. He was smart enough to know that what I just said was true and that the failure was on his side. He was also smart enough to know that acknowledging it outright would shift the negotiating position entirely. "We'd like to make an offer to acquire those parcels," he said. "Our team has estimated fair market value at about $68,000 for the acreage." I looked at him for a moment. "Prescott," I said, "$68,000 is the price of undeveloped raw land in this county. It is not the price of the 11 acres that control the only viable access route to a $40 million commercial development." He was quiet. "I'm not here to damage your project," I continued. "I have no interest in seeing 62 acres of Macon County sit undeveloped because of a land dispute. But I want to have an honest conversation, the one we probably should have had some time before Saturday morning." "Saturday was he started. "I know what Saturday was," I said. I kept my voice even. "I've been in business for 31 years, son. I've been in a lot of rooms where someone needed to establish the order of things. I'm not angry about it. I'd just like us to be clear, right now, in this room, about what kind of conversation we're having." He sat back. He was recalibrating. I could see it in the specific stillness of a smart man resetting his approach. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want to tell you about those parcels," I said, "and then I want to make you a proposal." I explained the drainage issue. I explained why I'd bought the land and what I'd observed about the soil composition in the eastern section of the site over the years since. I told him that the access road, as designed, was going to have settling issues within 5 years of opening, not because of the land acquisition problem, but because the preliminary geotech hadn't gone deep enough and was missing a clay layer that was going to move. He listened. He was quiet in the specific way of someone who is hearing something they don't want to be true but can't immediately disprove. "My proposal," I said, "is this. I'll sell you the eastern parcels at a price that reflects their actual strategic value to the project, which my attorney has calculated at $240,000. In exchange, Dolan Siteworks gets the grading and civil prep contract for the first phase of the build-out. Not a bid process, a direct award. I'll do it at market rate, and I'll do it right. And I'll warrant the work for 5 years, including the drainage corrections your current plan doesn't account for." He looked at me. "That's not a small contract." "No," I said. "It's not." "You planned this," he said. It wasn't a question exactly. It was the sound of someone arriving late at a conclusion. "I bought land I thought was useful 14 years ago," I said. "I didn't plan anything. Your team didn't check the title. And Saturday? I looked at him for a long moment. Saturday you made a choice, I said. I made a choice too. Mine was to wait until we were in a room where the conversation could actually accomplish something. He left without agreeing to anything. That was fine. I expected it. Men who spent their whole careers controlling the frame of a conversation need time when the frame shifts to recalibrate to the new architecture. He called back that evening. My daughter answered. They spoke for 22 minutes. I don't know everything that was said, but when she came out of the bedroom afterward, she sat down at the kitchen table and looked at me in a way she hadn't looked at me since she was about 15 years old. The way children look at parents when they are seeing them as people for the first time. He wants to talk again tomorrow, she said. I know, I said. Dad. She paused. Did you know? When you bought those parcels, I knew the ground was bad, I said. I knew somebody was going to need that land eventually. I didn't know it was going to be your husband's project. She looked at her coffee cup. He's going to have to go back to his partners. I imagine so. They're going to want to know how the title search missed this. That's their business to sort out, I said. My business is the proposal I put on the table. She was quiet for a moment. Then, did you hear what he said at the ceremony? The thing about tradespeople. I was standing right there, I said. I heard it, she said. I should have, I don't know. I should have said something right then. You didn't need to. Dad, sweetheart. I kept my voice gentle. You didn't marry a bad man. You married a man who was raised to see the world in a specific way and hasn't been given a reason yet to question it. That's a different problem. It's fixable. She looked at me for a long time. I don't know if she believed me entirely. I don't know if I entirely believed myself. But it was what I thought was true. And I found that leading with what you actually think is true is the one habit that almost never fails you. Prescott came back Friday. This time he brought one of his partners, a woman named Kathleen, who had the calm, watchful energy of someone who had spent 30 years cleaning up other people's deal mistakes. She shook my hand before she sat down. Firm, direct, no performance in it. I liked her immediately. They accepted the proposal. The land acquisition at $240,000. The direct contract award for Phase 1 grading, 5-year workmanship warrant on drainage. Kathleen did most of the talking. Prescott sat beside her and said very little. At one point while she was reviewing the warranty language, he looked up and found me looking at him. Not with satisfaction, not with anything triumphant. Just looking. He held the look for about 3 seconds. Then he said, for what it's worth. Saturday. I shouldn't have said that. No, I said, you shouldn't have. He nodded once. That was the whole thing. No wrong speech, no theatre. Just a man sitting with the weight of a mistake he couldn't undo. I told him something then that I hadn't planned to say. Something my father told me once, after a bad job, the kind where you cut one corner and then have to cut 3 more to cover the first one, and he found out about it and sat me down in this same office. A man shows you who he is when he thinks the gap between you is too wide to matter, I said. Saturday, you thought the gap was wide. It wasn't. The lesson isn't about the land, Prescott. The lesson is about the gap. He didn't respond, but I watched him hear it. That specific stillness again, the one that means a man is filing something away rather than discarding it. Work on the Hargrove Creek site started in June. My crew broke ground on the eastern access corridor first, correcting the grade and installing the drainage infrastructure 3 feet deeper than the original plan specified. By the end of the first season, the civil engineers from the county had walked the site twice and both times come back with the same word, solid. By the following spring, Meridian Horizon had brought Dolan Site Works in as the preferred civil contractor for their next 2 regional projects, not because of the land deal, because the work was right and the ground held. Prescott and I still aren't easy with each other, the way fathers and sons-in-law sometimes are, after enough years and enough shared dinners. There's a specific kind of trust that takes a long time to build between 2 men who got off on the wrong foot, especially when one of them was carrying most of the wrong. But last Thanksgiving he shook my hand when he came through the door. Not the toll booth handshake. The real one. Firm and present, and eye contact that didn't slide away. He held it a beat longer than necessary. My daughter saw it from across the room. She didn't say anything, but she smiled in the way she smiles when a piece of load-bearing ground turns out to be exactly as solid as she'd hoped. That was enough. My father would have known exactly what that handshake meant. He would have filed it in the same place he filed everything that mattered. Not in words. In the grip. In the 4 seconds of wait between two people deciding who they're going to be to each other from here on out. I've been in this business long enough to know that the ground always tells the truth eventually. You can dress it up, pour concrete over it, build a $40 million industrial park on top of it, but if the base isn't right, the surface won't hold. And no amount of title or money or the right side of a podium at a groundbreaking ceremony would change what's underneath. Prescott is still learning that. I think he's learning it honestly, which is the only way it takes. I don't need him to be the son I didn't have. I just need him to be the kind of man my daughter deserves. Most days now, when I watch him, I think he's working toward it. And in this life, working toward it is about as much as any of us can honestly claim.